Good evening, viewers. In today's special broadcast, we are joined by the Reverend Sun Myung Moon, who proposed the Peace Road and the Bering Strait Connection Project, grand initiatives designed to serve as a vital artery connecting the entire world. Reverend Moon, let's get straight to the point. While your vision is grand, the reality remains harsh. Paradoxically, this project aimed at breaking down global borders and building peace has been perceived as a major threat by various political forces and established interest groups both at home and abroad. Consequently, it has been targeted for severe political persecution, misunderstanding, and institutional obstacles. How do you view and confront this stark reality?
That is a very accurate and sharp observation. Speaking of peace is easy, but turning peace into reality requires a fierce battle against established interest groups. Opening up the Bering Strait and removing landmines from the DMZ is not merely a civil engineering project to dig up dirt. It is about dismantling the political and economic establishment that has gained power and profit through division and conflict. To politicians caught in nationalism, ideological forces surviving on Cold War confrontation, and defense industries reliant on war and conflict, a peace road that erases national borders is hardly a welcome guest. Fearing that their own ground would crumble, they have used all kinds of slander as well as legal and political measures to persecute and suppress us. That is the stark reality I have endured with my entire being.
As you pointed out, the peace project became entangled in partisan logic, serving as a pretext for political slander. Consequently, the initiative itself lost momentum and at times faced the risk of being buried entirely. Standing before the massive wall of power and political persecution, skepticism remains strong that this vision may ultimately end up as nothing more than an unachievable dream.
Political regimes last 5 or 10 years at most, but the path to human survival and peace is eternal. Political persecution is, in the end, nothing more than the final desperate struggle of those holding a vested interest in division. Jesus, as well as every pioneer throughout history, faced persecution at the hands of the established powers and political authorities of their era. Yet, a truth and an imperative tied directly to human survival do not simply vanish through suppression. Paradoxically, the Bering Strait and DMZ Peace Park projects became political targets precisely because they hold such a formidable, game-changing reality. The very fact that we face persecution is proof that we have struck right at the heart of the matter.
In that case, it seems time to move beyond noble ideals and talk about practical execution and concrete solutions. With the current geopolitical landscape so uncertain, and in the face of political persecution and regulatory hurdles, how do you realistically plan to break through these obstacles and advance the Peace Road project?
We will forge this path through 3 practical breakthroughs. First, we must exert pressure not through politics, but through economic and logistical inevitability. While politicians fight over ideology, nations and their citizens prioritize practical interests when it comes to economic survival.
Connecting the Bering Strait and the Eurasian Railway will cut transnational logistics costs in half, unlocking massive job creation and vast resource transport corridors.
By leveraging hard data on real-world economic benefits that even politically hostile factions cannot afford to ignore, we will bring governments and global corporations on board. Second, we will leverage the power of a global civil coalition comprising NGOs and multinational corporations that operates free from the influence of political regimes. No matter how much a single nation's political authority attempts to obstruct us, if conscientious civil societies, global enterprises, and international organizations across hundreds of countries unite, no single regime can arbitrarily block this path. While political persecution stems from the power of an individual nation, our coalition for peace is transnational. Third, We must convert the area into a UN asset through the DMZ Peace Park. If the DMZ on the Korean Peninsula remains merely a territorial battlefield between North and South Korea, it will continually be exploited for political expediency. By hosting the 5th UN office here and establishing it as an internationally neutral zone, we must turn it into a shared global peace asset that politicians would not dare touch.
So in short, your strategy is to break through directly by relying on transnational economic pragmatism and civil coalition rather than being swayed by political power.
Indeed. The stronger the wind blows, the more deeply I realize in my core that the path to peace is not a flower-lined road, but a journey of clearing gravelly ground and breaking through boulders. Just because we have suffered from political misunderstanding and persecution does not mean we can stop. If we rest, future generations will once again have to live through the tragedy of war and division. Those who oppress may attempt to block the way with sheer power, but the strength of our mission, the imperative to open this grand artery for humanity's survival, is far stronger than any political persecution. On the day the Bering Strait opens and flowers bloom in the DMZ, all the misunderstandings and persecution we have endured will be completely washed away before the monumental historical truth of world peace.
Reverend Moon, we previously examined the political and economic feasibility of the Bering Strait and the DMZ, but the current global situation is even harsher. The Russia-Ukraine war continues to drag on, and military conflicts in the Middle East surrounding the United States and Iran are shaking the global economy and security to their very core. What connection does the Peace Road actually have to these ongoing wars, and do you have a concrete plan to bring them to an end?
We must clearly see right through to the true nature of the tragedies unfolding across the global village today. The Russia-Ukraine war and the Middle East conflict surrounding the United States and Iran are not simple border disputes. They are the explosive results of territorial bloc formation driven by the struggle for resource and logistical supremacy and the deep-seated security anxiety of isolated nations. The Peace Road is not a dreamlike story detached from these ongoing wars. On the contrary, it is the most powerful geopolitical antidote to bring an end to these conflicts and prevent their recurrence.
First, let me ask about the Russia-Ukraine war. Russia is a key stakeholder in the Bering Strait project. However, it is currently facing heavy Western sanctions and continues to pursue the war. Under these circumstances, how can the Bering Strait project possibly serve as a key to resolving the conflict?
Why did Russia launch this war? Among the primary drivers were security fears over NATO's eastward expansion, a desire to maintain hegemony in the European energy market, and a desperate struggle against economic isolation. Yet, what are the consequences of this war? Nothing but depleted national finances, international isolation, and the tragic sacrifice of its youth. Peace cannot be achieved simply by utterly destroying or isolating Russia. We must provide Russia with both a rationale and practical benefits to make a soft landing as a peaceful economic powerhouse rather than a military aggressor. That exit strategy lies precisely in connecting the Trans-Siberian Railway and the Bering Strait. First, under a proposed peace infrastructure deal, we would pressure and guide Russia to divert its missile manufacturing budget toward funding the Siberian Bering Strait high-speed railway and undersea tunnel in exchange for the phased lifting of Western economic sanctions. Second, we connect the Peace Road Euro-Asia transcontinental rail network directly to the reconstruction of Ukraine's war-torn regions. Instead of leaving Ukraine as a mere buffer zone for conflict, this reshapes it into a state-of-the-art logistics and grain distribution hub linking Europe and Asia, guaranteeing its national security through an integrated global supply network. Third, instead of clashing over gas pipelines heading to Europe, we establish a comprehensive energy and power grid connecting North America and Asia via the Bering Strait, enabling Russia to survive not through military force, but as an energy and logistics partner.
The situation in the Middle East is equally critical. The confrontation between the United States and Iran, along with the threat of a blockade around the Strait of Hormuz, is holding global energy transport hostage. How can the peace road diffuse this Middle Eastern powder keg?
The core of the Middle East conflict lies in the hostage-taking of energy, transport routes, and religious and ideological isolation. Under a structure where Iran threatens to block the Strait of Hormuz and the United States responds with military force, World War III could erupt at any moment.
The Peace Road vision is not limited to connecting Alaska and Siberia. It encompasses a transnational land-based energy and logistics corridor linking Asia, the Middle East, Africa, and Europe.
Neutralizing maritime blockades with overland pipelines. Moving beyond the strategic trap of the Strait of Hormuz, we must build a land-based superconducting power grid and hydrogen pipeline connecting the Middle East, Central Asia, Eastern Europe, and Asia. This creates a resilient structure where energy distribution remains uninterrupted even if sea routes are blocked. Integrating Iran into the main stage of a peace economy, rather than merely isolating Iran as a state sponsor of terrorism, we must involve it as a key stakeholder in the Peace Road Highway connecting the Middle East and Asia. Through Swiss financing funds, we must prove that the economic benefits gained from international logistics, transit fees, and clean energy distribution are incomparably greater than anything derived from nuclear development or proxy wars.
In short, the solutions you've outlined create a framework that forces the warring parties to realize that laying down their arms is far more economically advantageous. But will nations currently consumed by hostility and actively engaged in combat really reach out and take that hand?
That is precisely why transnational interdependence is so crucial. While politicians and military leaders fight out of hatred and ideology, citizens and corporations are driven by survival. The most formidable form of security comes not from weapons, but from creating an economic lifeline, where if you die, I die as well. Consider what happens when the power grids of Russia, the United States, China, Iran, and even North Korea, which remains under an armistice with South Korea, are bound together into a single superconducting grid, with railways and pipelines traversing one another's territories. The moment a nation fires a missile at an adversary, a chain reaction is triggered, cutting off its own electricity and instantly paralyzing its own logistics and financial flows. This is the coolest and most definitive war prevention mechanism offered by the Peace Road, the physical deterrence of military action through the fear of mutual destruction.
So you are saying that preventing war is not about moral appeals, but an inescapable chain of logistics and energy that makes it physically impossible to fire missiles.
Exactly. Begging the political rulers who wage war to not go to war is the poorest strategy. The best strategy is to shackle them with global infrastructure, ensuring that the instant they instigate a war, the entire nation faces immediate bankruptcy and isolation. The sound of artillery in the Russia-Ukraine war, the roar of missiles in the Middle East, and the tensions along the DMZ will all lose their momentum the moment the grand artery of the Peace Road is opened. The way to end the tragedy of war is not by manufacturing more weapons, but by paving a path of peace for all humanity to travel together.
You have presented us with geopolitical solutions and actionable strategies for humanity to survive even amidst the crossfire. Thank you deeply and sincerely for sharing your valuable insights with us today.
Yes, thank you. You've done a wonderful job.